Hi, everyone. Welcome to LeapGround, the YouTube channel dedicated to disabled entrepreneurs and their journeys. Today, we have a wonderful guest, Miss Toni Chavis, and I'm not going to delve too deeply into her history because I want her to share her own story. But let's just say that I would compare her to the Phoenix, a woman who rose from the ashes to form at least two companies, one dedicated to design for TTC Enterprises, and something that's really close to her heart, the courageous women rise up. Let's welcome Miss Toni. Toni,
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, like you said, I am Toni Chavis, and I am the CEO of TTC Enterprises and Opulent Design. I am also the CEO of Courageous Woman Rise Up. So, just to give just a little bit of a backstory about me, I am, let me see, how do I put this? I'm a home improvement specialist, I'm an interior designer, I'm a realtor, I'm a veteran, I'm a mom, I'm a Mimi, I'm a business coach, and I'm an author, and I'm also an advocate for women's health and wellness. And what really brought me to that was I served 22 years in the Air Force, and my career took a detour right at the end because I started experiencing all of these health issues and, just not feeling well and exhausted and in pain all the time. And I woke up one morning paralyzed from the neck down. And I had no clue what was going on. I mean, I'd been feeling all these symptoms, and I was one of those people. I was always physically active. I played softball, I was into rollerblading and roller skating and volleyball and you name it. I was just, into all kinds of sports. And all of a sudden, I found myself at this point where I really couldn't do much and I was in pain all the time. So it actually took close to 2 years to get diagnosed or to try to figure out what was going on. And I was finally told I had fibromyalgia. Well, needless to say, back when that initially happened, nobody really knew anything about it. And that diagnosis, from what I found out, was more of a diagnosis of exclusion because they couldn't really figure out what was wrong. So they gave it the title of fibromyalgia. Now, what that also meant in a lot of cases to many doctors was they thought it was all up here.
thank you for giving that very, very comprehensive history. But yes, kindly continue. So they thought this was just some kind of psychological condition versus actually being a physical one. Kindly tell us what happened next.
Well, it it became a really tough process because you're trying to figure out what's going on. I'm active duty military at this time. So I have to use the military system to try to work through things. So one of the biggest things that I had to do, I mean, of course, everybody has their, regular doctor, their primary care doctor, but it quickly became apparent to me that this doctor didn't have the answers. So I did have to kind of really push to get to specialists in order to try to dig deeper and figure out what was going on. Now, mind you, we all have the power of the cell phone in our hand and the internet now. It wasn't as prevalent back then to really kind of research and try to figure out what was going on, but I did. I started researching and started kind of digging into things because, the more they kept trying to tell me it was all in my head, I kind of got a little angry about it because I'm like, this is not in my head because I'm a busy person. I'm on the go. I'm doing things and to all of a sudden not be able to do things that I love to do, I was like, no, something is going on. Now, fast forward, I kind of figured out my diagnosis before I met a doctor who finally went down that path. But one of the biggest things that was frustrating, probably within the process, was just the sheer fact that we all know when you go to a doctor's appointment, the doctors have a finite window of time that they're supposed to spend with each patient. So it wasn't until I got to one of those specialists who actually took time and listened to my entire story of what my symptoms were, the things that I was going through. Because the bottom line is, from day to day, it would change. Today it could be an issue with my hands, not being able to hold things, not being able to grasp things, numbness in my arms. Another day it might be numbness and tingling in my legs. So it was constantly kind of changing. And so, if you ask me today how I felt, today might have been a good day. Tomorrow might have been a day where I barely felt like I could get out of bed. So it was constantly morphing and changing. But I finally found that specialist who took enough time to listen to me and hear the broad story of what had been going on with me over the last couple of years. And so, as we talked, he said, "Well, you seem pretty intelligent to me." He said, "At this point, what do you think it is?" And when I said fibromyalgia, he said, "You've hit the nail on the head." So, but then became the challenge of learning about the condition. Many people didn't know much about it. They didn't know how to treat it. They didn't know what to do. So that became the next part of the process. Now, mind you, at this point in time, I'm still on active duty. So every day was a challenge. And it came to a point where I would make it through my week, Monday through Friday, and then I spent my entire weekend recuperating so I could try to get ready to go back to work on Monday. And it got so bad at one point that I I had been to Korea, and if anybody has ever been stationed in Korea, they have these mink blankets, and they're like the most wonderful thing in the world. They're these heavy, warm, just fuzzy blankets. I had one of those blankets. I put it in my car, and even in the midst of the winter months, I often where most people would go and take a cigarette break, I used to have to go take nap breaks. So I would go get in my car and I'd wrap up in my blanket and I'd set a timer for 15 minutes. And I would literally go in my car and I could pass out for 15 minutes. My timer would go off. I'd get up, kind of get myself together, and I'd go back in the office and I'd keep pushing through. Well, it really became a challenge and an issue in that last couple of years because now I had one of my doctors saying that I was not able to deploy. Well, one of my higher ups all of a sudden said, "Well, if you can't deploy, then we're going to separate you from the military." And I'm like, "Wait, hold on. What's, what do you mean you're going to separate me?" At this point, I've got 18 and a half years in the military. And I'm like, I've given my all to the military. I am not going to just walk away. So unfortunately, I found myself fighting for my military career my last few years. I had to go through medical boards and all kinds of things and testing, and it was daunting. The entire process was really daunting, but I got through it. And like I said, that morning that I woke up paralyzed, it was in the midst of all of this stuff that was going on. And now that, they were kind of like pushing to separate me from the military this close to retirement, my biggest goal at that point was to make it to the end. So I remember when I woke up that morning, my husband, had come back and forth through the room a couple of times, and I normally never slept in. It wasn't my norm. And he finally had stopped to ask me that day, "So are you planning on getting up today?" And all I could do was whisper and tell him that I couldn't move. So I remember, him grabbing me and, he sat me up and he was like, "Okay, I'm gonna go take you to the hospital." And I'm like, "No, no, we're not." And he's like, "Well, what do you mean?" And I said, "This would be all they need to separate me." So I prayed. I prayed like I'd never prayed before. And I was like, "Lord, just help me get myself together." I didn't know what was going on, but that was probably really the pinnacle of my health just really tanking. So, I mean, it took me all day, but it was like I just kept willing myself to get it together. I was like, come on, body, you can do this. You know, and I had been into meditation and things of that sort before. So I really mentally was just willing my body to move again. And so it was like eventually I could feel the blood, kind of like reaching my limbs. And, I finally felt like I was starting to get my circulation back because I was determined. I was not going to the hospital. I was not going to give them that ammunition against me. And so I did. I finally got it together and I got out of the bed that day. But in that process, though, over the next few years, I made it to my retirement date. I did. I made it there. I got to my retirement date. And I remember at this point, it had been quite a challenge and quite a struggle. In the Air Force, they send us to a medical review board sometimes if you choose to fight your disability claim. So I ended up going to the medical review board and they sent me all the way to Texas. So they sent me to Texas from Virginia. I'm in Virginia. My husband with me. And I can remember my lawyer coming out, my advocate coming out of the courtroom, and she had tears in her eyes. And she said, she just kind of paused. And I'm like, what's going on? What's wrong? And she says, we're not even going to go in front of the panel today. And I'm thinking, what's going on? Why? What happened? And she says, I just came out with another veteran who lost her legs in the war. And they denied her disability claim. She took off her prosthetic and they still didn't seem to understand how severe her disability was. And they were still going to separate her and they were not going to give her 100% disability. And she said, with your condition, we can't see it. She said, it couldn't be more visual than that. She says, with your disability, they can't see it. And she says, I already know they don't understand it. So, she kind of basically said, I know they're going to deny your claim for your disability. She said, so enjoy the rest of your time here in Texas. And she says, this is probably kind of where the buck stops here, but you're probably going to be medically separated. But the blessing that was in my favor at that point was I had basically reached right at my window of the 20 years on active duty. And I also had a couple of years of reserve time. So, in essence, that's how I had my 22 years of service. So, I made it to my retirement date. I was medically separated from the military. And even though they said I was no longer worldwide qualified, even though I had maintained and done my job right up until the end, they separated me with only 20% disability. So, needless to say, it was a blow. It was devastating. I had chosen the military as my career. I had raised my daughter, and many of those years I was a single mom, but I felt like I had given my all. And I felt like in my time of need, I wasn't getting that support that I needed. And it was really hard. It was. In that first 2 years after I initially separated, I went into a serious depression. And I lived on my sofa for almost 2 years. And at that point, I ended up on over 26 different medications.